Hello everyone and welcome to our first lecture for Introduction to Irrigation. We are going to take a brief look today at some terminology. We're going to go over just some basic concepts to supplement the other videos that you're watching. We do have people from kind of all different kinds of backgrounds in the class, and so I wanted to make sure that we all started off on the same page and that everybody felt comfortable with the terms and the types of systems we're going to be looking at. And so we're going to jump right in. And if you have any questions as you guys are watching one of my recorded lectures, I know we're not together in person, but I am more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. Please feel free to email me. You can shoot me a text, anything like that. But I'm more than happy to help in any way possible. So please use me as a resource. I don't want you to feel like just because we're in an online environment that I'm not here to help, because I definitely want to be there to answer those questions and help you continue your learning. One of the things I wanted to talk about just briefly before we continue with our lecture are irrigation associations. So I know I have some students from North Carolina. I think I have some students from other parts of the country in here as well, based on the registrations I was looking at. And in your first weekly discussion board, you're going to tell us a little bit about where you're at, what you hope to learn from the class, things like that. And so I did want to share the irrigation associations that can be very valuable for you for training, certifications, getting your CEUs. Like here in North Carolina, if you're installing irrigation and being compensated, you have to have an irrigation contractor's license, and so you have to get continuing education credits for that. So the Irrigation Association is a fantastic tool as well. And this is actually a lot of my PowerPoints that we'll use in this class have been developed from PowerPoints from them that they have used for helping train teachers, right? Because we're not out in the industry every day installing irrigation. And so some of the new techniques that come up and things like that, they help train us on. We go to them and they help teach us with hands-on things. And so some of my PowerPoints will be from them. But the Irrigation Association is awesome. It has a whole trade show conference. Usually it's in December. I'm not sure when it is this year. It also has at that conference, they have, like I said, a trade show. They have educational talks. You can take tests. Like you can get certified there for the different landscape certifications, like a certified irrigation technician, things like that. So there is a membership with them, but lots of benefits from the Irrigation Association. So definitely check them out. The other one that's more local to North Carolina and South Carolina is the Carolinas Irrigation Association, the CIA. So this one's a little different because it's more specific, but I encourage you, if you are not in North Carolina, I encourage you to take a look at the options that are available in your state or your area, because the CIA, the Carolinas Irrigation Association, they have great resources. They have memberships, they have newsletters, they have a conference, they have different workshops to help you with your CEUs. You can find a contractor that way. You can post jobs, find jobs. So there's a lot of different benefit to being a part of an industry organization like this, especially when you're working within the irrigation field. You can stay up to date on new technology. You can network. You can get new ideas. So lots of benefit to that for sure. So the next thing we're going to look at is, what is irrigation? Okay, many of you probably know the answer to this, and that's fantastic. And if some of you are pretty sure what the answer is, but maybe you still want some more explanation, that is perfectly fine too. But irrigation defined, and so this irrigation is from the Irrigation Principles and Practices book by V.E. Hansen et al. But it is the definition puts it very nicely. It is the application of water to soil, okay, the application of water to soil for the purpose of supplying the moisture essential for plant growth. Okay, so putting water to the soil for plant growth. All right, that is irrigation defined. Now, I do want to mention that even though a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about in this class is focused on landscape irrigation, there is a very big part of irrigation that is not landscape. So nurseries, greenhouses, hydroponic producers, right? The hydroponic producers aren't growing in soil, they're actually growing in water. So this definition still applies to them. We're still irrigating, but the soil is kind of taken out of the equation. There still is something holding the plant in place, but normally that's a trough or kind of like an inert substance, and the water's doing all the work. So irrigation can be used in a lot of different ways, right? When we think about irrigation, kind of what comes to your mind? Maybe someone's turf grass in their yard, a golf course, maybe a soccer field. What about a landscape bed with trees and shrubs, or a commercial property with trees and shrubs that need to be watered? There's also food production, right? And being able to irrigate food, or sorry, I already said landscape, but nurseries, greenhouses. The irrigation systems may also be used for frost protection. Okay, that's big here in North Carolina where I'm at. Strawberry crops, they like to bloom right at the time where we might not be past that last frost date, or we might get a late freeze, and that can ruin the flowers and the fruit. And so they will irrigate over top of them to get the ice to build up, and that kind of releases heat. So frost protection is a big thing. Also, environmental cooling. If you've ever been in a greenhouse, there are things called cool cells, and there has to be water running to those cool cells for them to work. So there is irrigation related to that. Even in hog houses, they use it for hog production. Yes, my southern accent throws that word off. It is H-O-G, hog production. But even in that type of situation, they use cool cells still to help keep the hog houses cool, and so they're using irrigation for that. So lots of different ways that irrigation comes into play. This picture here, again, is from one of the Irrigation Association presentations that we've been using to teach with for many years. This is showing the water balance, and it's a sketch of a basic water balance where it's accounting for applied irrigation and also rainfall. Okay, so you've got over here on the left, you've got rainfall, which is providing water to the plants. We've got irrigation, which is providing water to the plants. Now keep in mind, not all of this water that falls is going to be taken up by the plant, or not all of the water that falls can be taken up by the plant. And as you move through the activities this week, you are going to do a little bit of research on some definitions that relates to water movement, and so that will bring up some thoughts about water. Is it available? Is it unavailable to the plant? And so you're kind of going to research those just a little bit, and we'll continue to talk about that as we move forward. So you also have, so we have our plant here. There's also the process of transpiration happening, evaporation happening, runoff is occurring. So as we're looking at this, we are designing an irrigation system. Okay, we're designing an irrigation system so that we can manage our plant health, right? And we can do a good job at managing our plant health. If we're thinking about this in terms of agriculture, we're trying to water so that we can get the maximum yields from those plants. Okay, we're trying to get the maximum production, whether that's corn, whether that is soybeans or apples or bell peppers. We're trying to get the maximum yield possible. In the landscape, what is our yield? What are we trying to do in the landscape with irrigation water? Well, we're trying to make sure that everything is still aesthetically pleasing, right? We want everything to be beautiful and healthy, but not necessarily trying to get some maximum output of growth or anything like that. But we want it to have the water it needs so that it is aesthetically pleasing and it's creating that beautiful appearance that people love. So, looking at this slide, Can you think of any ways that water might be wasted from our irrigation system as we're putting it down onto the soil for the plant? What are some ways that it could be viewed as being wasted? Yes, if you're sitting there going, well, the runoff word, Liz, is right there in front of me. Yes, if we're putting irrigation down too much or our soil's too dry and it can't absorb the water well, then in some situations our runoff is wasted water. It runs away from the property. It runs away from the plant. It doesn't matter if that's rainfall or irrigation. We just had a hurricane come through central North Carolina and much of the southeastern part of the country, and there was a lot of runoff that happened. And so runoff can be wasted, right? That's kind of a waste, especially if we are irrigating. We don't want to be putting irrigation water on a sidewalk or a road or a patio where it's just going to run off because it's not getting to our plants. So again, the other terms on here, transpiration, that reason that is up here, transpiration is actually the loss of water, okay, through the stoma pores on the underside of a plant leaf. All right, that's a plant biology term. It's where the plant is actually letting water leave its leaves out of the stomata pores on the underside of the plant leaf. It's a very important process, though. It might sound like it's wasteful. Why is the plant just letting the water leave? That might sound wasteful, but it is not, because what it does is it actually creates a pull on the plant, on that root zone, on the roots of that plant to bring more water in. Plants take up the very large majority of their water through their root system. Okay? Plants take up the majority of their water through their root system. And so that transpiration process creates a pull, okay, and creates kind of a pull through the plant to bring more water in through the roots. So it's not wasteful. It's very important for the plant to get water in. Evaporation is another thing. We can have evaporation off of the leaf surface as well. We have evaporation off of the soil. So that's just the water going back into the atmosphere. We have the root zone. Okay, the root zone is an area where it is exactly what it says it is. It's an area where the roots are present in the soil. Okay, that is our root zone. That is where the plant is actively taking up water. Another big component for plant health, okay, another big component of plant health, and this ties into soils and fertility a little bit, but plants cannot take up nutrients, okay, for the most part, unless they are dissolved in water. So those nutrients that they need for nutrition have to be dissolved in water, and those are absorbed. The water with the nutrients in it is absorbed through that root zone. So that's another reason transpiration is important, because it's keeping that pull of water through, which means it's pulling in nutrients. And guess what? If there's no water in the soil for the plant to take up, it can't get access to those nutrients. Yeah, see how that all kind of comes full circle? It's very intriguing, such a cool thing to think about. The other thing that can happen with the water that we either apply or happens from rainfall is it can move down through our soil profile. So this orange box is obviously our soil, right? It can move down so far into the soil profile that it becomes unavailable for the plant to take up. Right? It moves towards the groundwater, goes farther than the roots can extend, and so the plant kind of loses that availability to take it up. So this is a little bit just about the water balance, thinking about we've got to think about when we're applying irrigation water, how are we going to get the most bang for our buck? How many of you have to pay for the water that you use? Or your clients have to pay for the water that you use on their property? A lot of you probably, right? Like if you're in a city, you're paying for the water. If you're in the county, you have a well that you've had to pay for and a pump that you've had to pay for, and you're paying for the electricity to get the water from the well into your landscape beds. Okay, so we have to pay for the water. Not only do we need to be concerned with the payment of the use of it, but we also have to be smart, because water having clean water, having enough water to support our communities and our livelihood is important. So we need to be watering in a smart manner to maximize plant growth, but not to the point where we are wasting water. Something very, very important to think about. And those that are in California and certain climates have seen that time and time again, and they've kind of had to redevelop their landscapes for how they water, or how they basically how they don't water in certain situations, and changing to what we call a xeriscape, which is where it's a very interesting landscape process where you try to grow plants that are drought tolerant so that you do not have to irrigate as much or as frequently. So just to briefly touch on the common methods for irrigation, we are going to go way into more detail on these. There's two. So we're going to go way into more details on these, but I did just want to talk about the two main methods that we're going to be looking at. The first one being sprinkler irrigation. Okay, so this is how we apply water in many situations: football fields, golf courses, even some nurseries, agricultural production. So sprinkler irrigation is where we are putting out water kind of over the top of the plants, kind of overhead. You can see in all of these pictures, the water, right, is going out and kind of getting spread out across the area that we're trying to irrigate. And there are some pros and cons that come with sprinkler irrigation, right? If a big gust of wind comes through, it can carry a lot of those water droplets away from where we actually intended for it to go. You can cover a lot more area much faster with sprinkler irrigation than you can with the other one. And we're going to look at some of those, but do know there are pros and cons. But really, this is what I call almost an overhead method of irrigating, where you're watering over the tops of the plants. But being familiar with what you're growing, what your pressure of your system is, the tolerances of the plants, the irrigation design and system, you will eventually have to make a choice of, is overhead irrigation going to work in this situation, or do I need to try the other method, which is drip irrigation? So these images are showing different methods of drip irrigation. And sometimes drip irrigation is used because you can't overhead irrigate because you're going to spray people walking on the sidewalk, or you're going to, the crops you're growing or the plants you're growing they don't do well when their leaves are wet because it can cause disease issues, insect issues. Drip irrigation is also very, very good at getting the water to the soil, right? Like you see this picture right here on the top right. That drip system is getting the water straight to that soil. If the wind blows, it doesn't matter because it's not going to blow water droplets away. It's putting the water right where you want the water to go. Okay, and there's several different methods for doing this in the landscape, in agriculture, in nursery and greenhouse. There's lots of different variations of drip. But drip irrigation, sometimes referred to as low volume irrigation, it's very efficient. Okay, it's very efficient compared to overhead in some situations. It can take longer, though, to get the same amount of water applied through drip than it does through overhead or sprinkler irrigation. So that wraps up our very first introductory lecture, talking about just an introduction to irrigation. You have some other videos to watch focused on a residential system install, just to get you thinking about irrigation, to kind of start thinking about the process of irrigation install. You will have a weekly discussion board, and like I said, you have an activity related to some terminology that I want you guys to work on, all to get your minds primed and kind of thinking about irrigation. And then over the next few weeks, we're going to dive in deep to the topics we're covering. Each week we have 3 hours of content that could be videos blended with discussion boards, activities, Kahoot reviews, which is just like a little online quiz. Lots of cool ways to look at all the stuff we're doing instead of just listening to me talk for hours and hours and hours. That is not what this class will be like. We will have lectures, we will have videos to watch, but I like to incorporate different ways for you guys to get exposed to the things we're covering. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to help in any way I can, and I'm so excited to have you guys in class, and I look forward to getting to work with you.